Hello, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Anna Toney, and I am the Executive Director here at Leadership Toledo. We are wrapping up our final session of this portion of our Community Leadership Series, and we are so excited to have you all here with us today. And for some of you who I think have been here for all of them, we really appreciate your support of this, and this would not have been possible without the support of First Energy Foundation, which made this possible to provide to everyone at no charge. So it's been really fun, really interesting, and I have no doubt that Eugenio is going to wrap us up here for 2020, also providing us a lot of good information and a thoughtful conversation with him today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Eugenio Mollo. He is the managing attorney of the Agricultural Worker and Immigrant Rights Practice Group at Advocacy for Basic Legal Equality, also known as ABLE. In addition, he teaches immigration law as an adjunct professor at the University of Toledo College of Law. He is very active in the community. He is a steering committee member of Welcome Toledo Lucas County, Welcome TLC, and he sits on the boards of Toledo Lucas County Library Legacy Foundation and ProMedica Metro Hospitals Foundation. He has also served at numerous levels, including board chair of Equality Toledo. Eugenio is an alum of the Ohio State Bar Association's Leadership Academy. So again, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can throw those in the chat and I will make sure that Eugenio gets those. And then I also want to say this up front, we do an eval at the end of each session, and this one actually has another question that we would really love your feedback on if we should continue this series and what type of topics you'd like to hear from. So if you could please pay attention to that and fill that part out, that would be great. So without further ado, Eugenio, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Anna, for that introduction, for organizing this. Good afternoon to everyone. Again, thank you to Leadership Toledo for the invitation to present on today's last session of this community leadership series. It's a pleasure to wrap up the series, and I'm honored to be part of the group of such well-respected community leaders. So Anna shared a little bit about my background. This slide shares a little bit more about me and my journey of purposeful living. My big point here is that 20 years ago, I honestly didn't know that I'd be an attorney or living in Toledo. My undergraduate degree is in something somewhat different. It's in history and in education. No one in my family was a lawyer. My siblings and I are all first-generation college students. We're first-generation college students. But I was driven by values and passion. And I always had a strong interest in working with immigrants. My parents are Italian immigrants. I grew up in a Chicago neighborhood with many other immigrant families. Next door neighbor, Lithuanian immigrant. Across the street neighbor, a Mexican immigrant family. Down the street, a Chinese immigrant family, very close to me. And even when I enrolled in law school, it was just the next step on my journey. Law school and the practice of law really didn't click with me until my first summer of law school. I was a law student at the University of Iowa. I learned about this opportunity, advocating work and for farm workers in Fremont, Ohio. So I went to school at Iowa, I came to Ohio, I worked with Legal Aid of Western Ohio, which is ABLE's partner organization, for that summer. So that summer of 2004, I had never even been to Ohio before that summer. And the picture on the screen is a picture of me with my very first outreach partner, Felipe, and he will always have a special place in my heart. And this summer of 2004, again, it was my first summer of law school. It's a summer that I will never forget. That's where I started on this journey of really finding my fulfillment, right? I felt fulfilled by the work, by my clients, by their stories, by their struggle, by their courage, by their resilience. I felt my calling with advocacy, with advocating for principles of equality and fairness. And I continued on this path through law school. My second summer, I went down to Raleigh, North Carolina, and worked with farm workers there. And then after graduating from law school, I was incredibly fortunate to receive a 2-year fellowship that brought me back to Ohio to represent low-wage workers. And it was during this 2-year period that I really fell in love with ABLE, the unique opportunities that ABLE offers. I fell in love with Toledo. I fell in love with my now husband, and that was important to get in. And here I am, almost 15 years later, and I'm really proud to call this lovely place home. So this timeline might seem very linear. It might seem all mapped out and organized, but having lived through it, part of me was really scared. All I knew was that my values and my passion were guiding me on this journey. You may have heard of a famous quote by Roy Disney. It goes, "When your values are clear to you, making decisions becomes easier." So I encourage you to spend some time, and I think the holiday season is a wonderful time for that, finding, or maybe even for some of you, rediscovering what your values are. So I want to take a step back. Big picture, sometimes people don't recognize how unique practicing immigration law is in Toledo. There's a lot of media attention that focuses on immigration issues along our southern border, and there's certainly a lot happening there. But there's also a lot happening here in Toledo along our northern border. So this map illustrates all the different federal agencies that operate out of the northern part of Ohio. We have a very active Customs and Border Protection office out of Port Clinton. Border Patrol operates out of this office. You may have seen their green and white vehicles, maybe on Route 2, maybe on the Turnpike. We also have, Northwest Ohio has an immigration detention center. The Seneca County Jail in Tiffin has a contract with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and they house, not right now during COVID, the numbers are a little bit smaller, but at any given time, more than 100 immigrant detainees there on civil immigration charges. And if you live in Toledo, and if you're in deportation proceedings, the immigration court that has jurisdiction over your case is in Cleveland, the EOIR, the Executive Office for Immigration Review. It's the immigration court. There's also a Citizenship and Immigration Services office in Cleveland, a CIS office in Cleveland. That's where clients attend interviews for citizenship, for green cards, things like that. So this map is, again, very Toledo-centric. If you were to live in Cleveland or Columbus, you would have all of these federal agencies as well. They would just be in different locations, right? So there's a few immigration detention centers, for example, spread out across the state. So this is just a Toledo-centric map. But again, right, Northern Ohio, it might not be the first thing you think of when talking about immigration or immigration law, but we have all of those federal immigration agencies right here in our own backyard. So in addition to having those federal immigration agencies, right, we also have a lot of foreign-born individuals. So according to the census, Northwest Ohio, depending on how you define it, has about 40,000 foreign-born individuals, and they comprise various immigration statuses: naturalized US citizens, lawful permanent residents, sometimes called green card holders, people here on visas, people here on work permits, We have asylees, we have refugees. There's a refugee resettlement agency in West Toledo called Us Together. They resettle refugees. We have students here, of course, at University of Toledo or BGSU that are here on F1 visas. We have agricultural guest workers who are here on H-2A visas. We have people who are here on DACA status, again in the news, starting last Friday, right? The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. We also have people who have never had status, or maybe they've fallen out of status, people who are living in Northwest Ohio in an undocumented immigration status. And the image I sometimes use when giving immigration presentations in the community, it's to the right of the screen, it's this broken ladder image, right? It's my job as an immigration lawyer to help people climb this ladder to a higher, more secure immigration status. Sometimes federal laws or policies cause some backwards movement, if you will, a broken step maybe. And we as immigration lawyers do our best to help advocate with our clients to keep climbing up this ladder. Of course, only if the law allows it, clients to move up this ladder. And perhaps, maybe not surprising to some of you on this webinar, there have been a few broken steps, a few setbacks over the past couple of years, and it's really been damaging to a lot of our community members. There's been a lot of fear, a lot of confusion, a lot of panic, and the slide on the screen is just a snippet of some changes or attempted changes that have happened over the past 3 or 4 years. The Migration Policy Institute recently came out with a report that said that there's been 400 significant changes in immigration law and policy over the past, I should say actually policies, over the past 3 or 4 years under this current Trump administration. So just some highlights from the screen, right? This includes 4 versions of the Muslim ban. This includes the president threatening to end family-based immigration. This includes attempts to terminate DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. This includes a slashing of refugee numbers, currently set at 18,000 for the fiscal year that we're in. There were even a couple of days, I think within his first year, where the president tweeted saying that he is going to issue an executive order overturning the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship. He doesn't have the authority to do that, but he tweeted it and there was some media attention around it. And every time that news broke about one of these executive actions or threatened executive actions, right? My colleagues and I, our office would receive a lot of phone calls from very concerned clients or community members asking questions, right? How will this affect my case? Will I be deported? Will I be separated from my children? Will I lose my job? It was very, a lot of questions. And sometimes we had answers explaining the legal process of what would need to happen, but many times, right, we didn't have answers, and that caused even more emotional pain for our clients. Many times we're taught and we expect that when you're confused, you go to a lawyer. A lawyer will help you. They'll explain everything. But what happens when you, the lawyer, learn about this news at the same time as your clients? So many times we found ourselves navigating through these muddy waters with our clients. And it was muddy at times. Sometimes it felt like quicksand. It was very overwhelming. We were on very unstable ground. We were really overwhelmed. We saw massive raids in Ohio over the past couple of years. 1 arrest, The one that happened in the eastern part of the state arrested 146 people. And at that time, it was the largest raid conducted under this current Trump administration. And even when we didn't see these large scale employer raids, right? We saw and we continue to see regular apprehension of people being arrested at their homes, out in public, at turnpike, rest stops, after walking their kids to school. And that has caused a lot of family and community separation. And the numbers support that, right? So policies over the past 3-4 years have affected a lot of people, real people who harvest our food, people who pack our salads, people who work in slaughterhouses, they milk our cows. They are extremely essential, right? Sometimes these agricultural workers, these immigrant workers don't receive that sort of recognition, but they are essential to sustain me and to sustain all of you. But over the past few years, arrest numbers for people have gone dramatically up. So in the first year of the Trump administration, arrests were up 42%. We've also seen a skyrocketing of people in removal proceedings or people in deportation proceedings, right? Significant rises. So at the start of the Trump administration, there were about 6,000 people in removal proceedings, in deportation proceedings. Now there's about 16,000 people in removal proceedings. There's more judges adjudicating these cases. So at the start of the Trump administration, there were only 3 immigration judges. Now there's 9 immigration judges, right? There's 8 that are actively, regularly hearing cases, and there's an assistant chief immigration judge. So it's all part of this, some people call it a deportation machine, right? To get people in and out of these proceedings that usually result in, right, a deportation order and the execution of that deportation order, causing, again, family and community separation. So that's all, right, terrible for the clients, the community, their families, for sure. There's also been a lot written about how these policies affect other people, specifically the lawyers who are representing the immigrants in their cases. So the first snippet, right, the piece from the American Prospect, the loneliness of the immigration lawyer. Immigration attorneys say that they're battling Trump's war of attrition, right? Policy after policy, regulatory change after regulatory change, really wearing people down through a series of attacks. This article out of the Texas Observer, right? In the Trump era, practicing immigration law is like swimming in molasses. So it's overwhelming many days. It's important for my coworkers and I, right, to be cognizant of burnout, compassion fatigue. These themes have come up in other leadership series sessions, secondary trauma, the need to practice self-care, and really the need to have supportive employment practices and policies. So what did we do? What did we do as advocates for immigrant communities? So ABLE is a nonprofit law firm. We advocate on behalf of our clients. We regrouped, and I work with a fantastic group of colleagues. We're spread out over Western Ohio and Central Ohio. And we focused on our strengths. And we knew that our strengths were education and representation. So one of the first things we did is that we underwent a massive education campaign. And in 2017, the first year of these major shifts in immigration policy, just out of our Toledo office, we conducted 79 presentations reaching more than 4,500 people just in Northwest Ohio. So that averages about 6 or 7 presentations a month. We conducted these presentations in the top 4 languages that are spoken in Lucas County, which are English, Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. We did these presentations at libraries, at partner agencies, at schools, places of worship. We developed a book that you see on the screen, about 30 pages of information that people just needed to have during this difficult time, right? Preparing your family for immigration enforcement. What are your rights if you're apprehended by law enforcement while driving, while at home, while in public? A referral list for other immigration legal services providers. A limited power of attorney to make sure that childcare needs and emergency needs are addressed in case a parent or parent is apprehended by immigration authorities. There's a family planning guide, so we encourage families to do planning before the worst case situation might happen, and ways in which, if you are apprehended by immigration authorities, how families can locate you through the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement online detainee locator system. And practical information about how to post a bond so families can be reunited. So we produced this educational information. We applied for extra grants. We were fortunate to receive a number of them that really helped in disseminating this information in languages that people best understood. So this Preparing Your Family for Immigration Enforcement Guide is now available in 8 languages, the languages that you see on the screen. It's all available on our website. So in addition to educating our clients, we also thought that it was really important to educate the community about our efforts, about our clients' struggles, what they're facing, the importance of having an immigration lawyer on your side during these really stressful times. So this report that you see on the screen, it comes out in January or February of every year about data and stories on the preceding year. It's also a way to recognize our funders and our partners. Welcome TLC is, as Anna mentioned, it stands for Welcome Toledo Lucas County. It's the local immigrant friendly initiative. And something that I take great pride in is that Lucas County is a certified welcoming community. Welcoming America is the certifying agency. They're an international organization, and they have certified Lucas County as a certified welcoming community. It's a very prestigious recognition of all of our community efforts, all of our collaborative work. And Welcome TLC is sort of the parent or umbrella organization that keeps all of these service providers together. So Welcome TLC used to be housed at the Board of Lucas County Commissioners. Within the past year or two, they've transitioned to the Toledo Lucas County Public Library. And they're a huge supporter of immigrant initiatives in our region. So in this report, there's also a narrative piece. There's presentation numbers, there's case numbers, there's a description of the sorts of cases that we handle. Broadly speaking, we have, it's a family-based and a humanitarian-based immigration practice. So we help people naturalize their status. We help people obtain citizenship. We represent people in their U visa applications for victims of crime. We represent asylum seekers. Since the Supreme Court decision came out earlier this year, we're processing DACA renewal cases. That's the deferred action for childhood arrivals. So it talks about our cases and our impact on our clients' lives. In addition to this report, a lot of federal litigation work. And earlier this year, I'll brag a little bit about my brilliant colleagues. They won 2 major class action victories against the Ohio BMV. Very simply speaking, the BMV was denying driver's licenses to certain refugees. They were also denying driver's licenses to 16 and 17-year-old US citizens whose parents were undocumented. So we were successful in those lawsuits, and those lawsuits positively affected more than 5,000 people from across the state. So we do our best to juggle those responsibilities. Individual case matters that certainly will have a large impact on people's lives, creating immigration status stability or keeping families together, right? That's impact, right? It may only affect one person, but on that one person, keeping that family together is impact. On the other balance of that is doing these larger impact litigation cases, which again impacts many, many people on a wide scale basis. So we're constantly juggling those responsibilities. Another thing we do with our annual reports is reaffirming our values of fairness, of equality, of due process for all. Some people might not appreciate that you're not entitled to a government-funded lawyer if you're facing deportation. If you can afford a lawyer, then you can have a lawyer, but the government doesn't have to provide one for you if you can't afford one. And it matters if you're represented. So there's a study out by the Vera Institute of Justice. Immigrants who are represented in court are up to 10 times more likely to establish a right to remain in the United States, right? So this is, as such, who wins and loses in immigration court is not determined just by the merits of the case, but by whether or not an attorney is involved, right? So it makes a difference if you have a lawyer by your side in these really crucial deportation cases, right? So ABLE provides the services as best as we can, given our resources, right? The point here is that in our reports, we help educate individuals how vital having an attorney really is for the immigrant and the family. So I just covered work that we have done as a team, the Agricultural Worker and Immigrant Rights Practice Group team. I'm very fortunate to lead that team as the managing attorney. I serve that team the best as I can. But this slide, are Eugenio's humble offering of best practices, right? So these are 5 best practices that have really helped me push through these last 4 years. And they're a part of my regular practice right now as a professional. So we'll go through these 5 humble offerings, right? Know your profile. Find predictability, especially if you feel like you're living in a chaotic world. Manage time and responsibility. Recognize that each day is an opportunity to practice, and encourage cyclical serving and permit yourself to replenish. So know your profile. I know other presenters on this leadership series have encouraged people to know your profile. I repeat that advice, and here I'll apply that advice in my own situation. So There's different assessments out there. One that I find particularly helpful is Strengths Finder, which, as the name implies, identifies key strengths, key values of each person. So just as an example, my top two strengths are learner and discipline. So learner's not terribly exciting, I'll admit that, but check out the description under discipline, right? My world needs to be predictable. It needs to be ordered and planned. And as you may have picked up, especially over the past 4 years practicing immigration law, my world has been everything but predictable and planned. So how did I create that predictability and order? So one way that I do it is through a pretty rigid morning routine. And for me, that involves a morning run. It's an opportunity for me to clear my mind, focus on my breathing, enjoy nature. We have some really beautiful sunrises in Northwest Ohio. A special time for me, if you can get out between dawn and sunrise, the pictures that you see on the screen, taken in between that period of time. So I encourage you to find whatever works for you to find that predictability. If you're a personality type that values predictability. So broadly speaking, my advice here is to encourage you to know your profile and then take the next step. Make sure that you're taking advantages, taking advantage of those strengths, and then make regular habits and routines out of them. The next suggestion that I have is to manage time and responsibility. So if you've ever attended maybe a time management session, you've probably been told to focus on the tasks that are both urgent and important. Maybe that graphic at the upper right-hand corner of the screen is something you've seen before. And maybe something that doesn't get the attention that it deserves is this third question, right? So not only do you want to look at how soon does it matter or how much does it matter, but for how long does it matter, right? Is there something that you can do today that you can eliminate or delegate or automate? A system you can put in place right now that might take you a few hours today, but it'll make tomorrow and the next week cumulatively better. Don't get me wrong, it is still very, very possible to feel overwhelmed and overworked, but there still might be opportunities to better manage time and responsibility. So, and I encourage you to explore these options. Another aspect of managing your time and responsibility effectively is knowing how to optimize your energy. And a couple of years ago, Daniel Pink came out with a new book called When, The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. And right, this really focuses on knowing your body rhythm, right? Timing really matters. So for me, when I need to focus on research and brief writing, I'm telling you, I am definitely at my best in the morning. It's after my morning run. It's after my morning coffee. It is my peak energy time. It's my prime time. So I try to schedule my most analytical work in the morning and maybe my more creative work in the afternoon, right? And a lot of science has been done. Daniel Pink documents it in his book, right? We go through these different mood cycles. So recognize that that happens and try to, schedule your day along these cycles, right? If you're a morning person, most people are morning people, right? Right? This is the cycle. We go through a peak, we go through a trough, and then we go through a recovery. If you're a morning person, recognizing that, right, when you need heads down focus, vigilance, attention, battling away distraction, your morning might be the best time in order to accomplish those challenging tasks. Something that has helped me as well is this fourth suggestion, is recognizing that each day is an opportunity to practice. And that really resonates with me. Every now and then you might come across a little nugget of meaningful and applicable advice given your situation. It might be when you're watching TV or checking your social media feed or reading a book or a magazine. One that has stayed with me over the past 4 years and that I go back to on a regular basis is this episode of Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. It's from 2017. He interviews the Dalai Lama. And during the interview, the Dalai Lama says, I practice taking others' anger, suspicion, distrust, and give them patience, tolerance, and compassion. I practice that. And I think it's the word practice that the Dalai Lama used in this interview that really captured me, right? So you might practice law, you might practice social work, you practice your job. No one expects perfection all the time, right? Your practice involves constant attention, constant reflection. That's why it's called a practice. And I think it's this recognition that some days, some situations, they really challenge me. And I've created a habit that when I find myself in those challenging situations, that this quote comes to mind. And it's really helped shape some really difficult conversations for me. So my suggestion here is to capture those nuggets that really resonate with you, save them as favorites, maybe on your YouTube profile, and go back and rewatch and revisit those snippets of guidance when you need them. So wrapping up here, last couple of slides. My last offering is to promote cyclical serving, right? Encouraging yourself and others to pay it forward, to multiply the impact of giving, multiply the impact of purpose. So there's 3 examples here that I wanted to offer in an immigration context. The first is taking on pro bono cases. Pro bono cases are cases done without charging the client for representation. As Anna mentioned, in addition to my responsibilities at ABLE, I teach immigration law at the University of Toledo College of Law. And I've had a few students over the past year contact me after graduating, willing to take on pro bono cases. They want to give back to the community after learning about our immigration laws, about our systems. There's also a fantastic lawyer at Shoemaker, Loop, and Kendrick. Shout out to her. I won't mention her name, but she devotes her practice to mainly environmental law. But she wanted to explore giving her time to immigration cases. And she has been extremely successful in representing specifically victims of domestic violence, in their petitions for immigration relief. So that's one way, right, to encourage cyclical serving in an immigration context. Number two is a local group out of Toledo that started pretty quickly after the 2016 election. It's a volunteer group called Gather Toledo. The photo on the screen shows a picture taken after one of their events. And they organize meals inside community members' homes. So people open their homes to host these dinner parties, obviously not happening right now during COVID times, but they do, they have happened, and I'm hopeful that they will happen once restrictions are lifted. So these are dinner parties where community members welcome primarily refugee families into their homes, and they share a night of conversation, of food and culture, recognizing that there's way more that unites us than divides us. So it was a way for these volunteers who weren't actively practicing law or not lawyers to give back to the community. They found a way that they can contribute, that they can serve. And the third example here that I'll share is a fundraiser that some really fantastic community leaders organized a couple of years ago. They knew that ABLE was being bombarded with a lot of client demands, right? A lot of client community fears, requests for assistance. And they approached us and they offered to host a fundraiser as their way of showing support to ABLE and the communities in which we serve. And one of the reasons why this example of service was so heartwarming and emotionally replenishing for me was because they're the ones who thought of this idea. They're the ones who approached me and ABLE about it. And they're the ones who did 99% of the work, right? They're the ones who used their brilliance, their connection, their passion to host this very successful fundraiser. It wasn't something that ABLE was promoting as a way to support immigrants and refugees, but that didn't matter to these three women. There's a link on the slide, and I think the slides will be distributed, right? Things you can do to support immigrants and refugees. Hosting a fundraiser, again, isn't on that slide, but these community leaders on their own initiative reached out and stepped up when it really meant a lot to me and others. So I leave my email address on the slide. I'll leave you with that story. This holiday season is a perfect opportunity to reflect on your values, your passions. Think about ways that you can contribute, because I really want you and other members of this community to enjoy a more meaningful and purposeful life. So these are just some ways to do it in an immigration context. And I hope that right, this holiday season, you can do some reflection, think about your values, rediscover those values and passion, and put those values into good work, because there's a lot of opportunities in Toledo. And
thank you.
I will end there right now, and I hope there's questions and comments.
Thank you so much. Rachel says, how has ABLE been assistance to the Mexican children that have been detained and have not been either sent back to their homes or connected with their parents?
So a lot of the children who are on our border, at least a few years ago, they were released into the United States, and ABLE represents and continues to represent a lot of those children that have made their ways to Ohio. Where the children are still along our southern border, we work closely with, there's a state bar association called the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And I could think of at least a handful of lawyers that have volunteered a week, week and a half, going down to the Texas facility. It's in Dilley, Texas, Dilley, to represent those children and families in those proceedings. So in addition, right, we write policies and advocate at a national level to end those practices that are happening along the southern border. So that's three ways. One, when they come to Ohio, we represent them. Two, we'll send our attorneys down to the Texas border to advocate for those clients. And three is policy advocacy at the federal level. Good question.
Thank you. Are ERs required to contact ICE on a patient?
Are required to?
Rooms. Yeah.
So maybe the question is, right, if there's a patient who's suspected of maybe not being in a lawful immigration status, no, there's no obligation, right? No, you don't. One, I don't know how you know that a person is here in an undocumented immigration status, but I don't know of any, right? There's no obligation. And actually, I would discourage any hospital or social service agency or any agency with, right, some sort of community status to get into the immigration enforcement arena. That's right. That's not our role. We're serving people, and those services and opportunities should be available to everyone, regardless of their race, their national origin, their immigration status, anything. So, right, we should be making our services available to everyone in the community.
Great questions. Do you educate those agencies not to do it? Like
so I don't know if anyone's ever asked not to do it. We do community presentations just so many providers are familiar with immigration, the basics of immigration law, and risks that maybe organizations would face if they're viewed by community leaders as immigration enforcement agencies. Again, I would really welcome a conversation for any organization that thinks that they have some sort of duty or obligation to do that. I think that's really adverse to a lot of clients' interests. Part of that is because, right, we just can't, a lot of families are in mixed status families. So even where there's an undocumented member of the family, that undocumented member of the family might have a US citizen child or a lawful permanent resident spouse. These issues are very, very complicated. So thinking that you can only take adverse action that would only impact one person, that's not the way our society works. That's not the way our family systems work. That's not the way our community works, right? Every time you pull out a person from a family, you're destabilizing that household, that worker, the money that person is contributing to the family. It has really lasting effects beyond just that immediate person.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot of, thank you for all the work that you do in the community, Eugenio. It's not a simple situation, and it takes very dedicated people. And as someone said with our speaker last week, people with very special hearts to be able to take on this work, because I imagine it can be very emotional at times, obviously, for the families and for those working in that. So a couple things that I took away from today is, you talk about the path that we think that we're set on often doesn't end up that way. And I just think that that happens more often with all of us than maybe we like to envision when we're, maybe 18, 19 years old. And just the importance of educating the community on what the constituents that you are working with. You'll have to excuse me. I'm kind of doing double duty right now with being mom and on here. So just the importance of—
You're doing great.
the importance of educating the community on the issues that people are facing right now. So, and the last thing I have to comment on is I don't know that most people are morning people, right? So I'm a morning person, but I think I'd love to get a poll of that. So
that should have been a good poll question. I'm sorry.
Yes,
yeah.
So thank you so much, Eugenio, and thank you all of you for joining us today. And I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. And please take a minute to fill out the job form that we have. And we look forward to your feedback. And if you need anything from us or want to get in contact with Eugenio, I'm sure that would be perfectly fine with him. So thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.